200 men walked into that ring with confidence. 200 men walked out defeated. Some lasted 6 seconds. Some barely made it to 4. A judo black belt from Osaka, one of the best in the world, lasted 8 seconds and thought that was something to be proud of. Not a single human being on this planet had survived 10 seconds against him. Not one. If you've ever felt like no matter how hard you train, no matter how skilled you become, there's always someone bigger and stronger who can just overpower everything you've built. This story is going to change the way you think about that forever. His name was Viktor Kranov, not his real name, of course. Nobody used real names in the underground martial arts circuit of the 1960s. They called him the Mountain, 6'3", 500 pounds of raw, unprocessed, terrifying human mass. He was a former Soviet Greco-Roman wrestler who defected to America in 1961 and quickly discovered something far more profitable than competitive wrestling: fear. He sold fear, and business was absolutely booming. The challenge he offered was brutally simple: survive 10 seconds, not win, not land a single punch, not outsmart him, just survive, stay on your feet, stay conscious, don't tap out, don't get thrown outside the ring. 10 seconds, that's it. The reward sitting in that briefcase was $80,000. In 1967, that was more than most working Americans earned across 4 full years, enough to buy a house in Los Angeles, enough to completely transform a life. The catch was that across 200 attempts, spanning 15 different cities, nobody had ever touched that money. Not once. The briefcase sat at the edge of every stage, visible, tempting, and completely untouched. Los Angeles, California, the Grand Olympic Auditorium, November 11, 1967, Saturday night. The International Martial Arts Exposition was deep into its second day. The auditorium held 800 people, and tonight it was nearly full. The air carried the smell of popcorn, leather, and sweat. Cigarette smoke drifted lazily through the spotlight beams above the main stage, making the fighters moving through it look like shadows dissolving into clouds. But everyone in that building knew exactly why they were really there. Not for the karate demonstrations, not for the judo throws, not for the aikido wrist locks. They were there for the bold red letters printed on every poster plastered across martial arts schools from San Diego to San Francisco. The Mountain Challenge. Survive 10 seconds. Win $80,000. Beneath that, a record that read like a casualty report. 200 challengers, 200 defeated. Average survival time, 4.7 seconds. And beneath all of that, a single question engineered to reach into the chest of every martial artist who read it and squeezed their ego until it either inflated or completely collapsed. Are you brave enough? In the 14th row, a small man in a black Mandarin collar jacket quietly read the program. His eyes landed on that number, 4.7 seconds. He read it again. His expression didn't change at all. His name was Bruce Lee, 27 years old, 138 pounds, 5'7", the same man who 3 years earlier had made 500 karate practitioners question everything they believed at the Long Beach International Championships. The same man who played Kato on television and moved so fast that cameras literally could not capture him at normal recording speed. The same man who could perform push-ups on 2 fingers and send a 200-pound man flying across a room with a punch that started only 1 inch from the target. That man was sitting in row 14, reading a program that declared no human being on Earth could survive 10 seconds against the Mountain. And something behind his eyes quietly shifted. 3 days before this night, his student Dan Inosanto had called him. Dan had 2 extra tickets to the expo, but that wasn't the real reason for the call. He called because he knew exactly what Bruce Lee could never walk away from, a problem that nobody had yet solved. Dan told him there was a giant at the expo, nearly 500 pounds. The man had been systematically destroying martial artists across the country, 200 challengers across 15 cities. Nobody had lasted 10 seconds. Not karate black belts, not judo champions, not wrestlers, not boxers, nobody. Bruce went quiet on the phone. Dan recognized that silence immediately. That particular silence meant Bruce Lee's mind had just shifted into a gear that most human brains simply don't possess. The processing gear, the problem-solving gear, the gear that turned a thin kid from Hong Kong into the most dangerous 138 pounds alive. What's his technique? Bruce asked. That's the thing, Dan replied. He doesn't really have one. He just grabs you, and once he grabs you, it's completely over. The strength is so overwhelming that technique becomes entirely meaningless. He picks men up and throws them, pins them, crushes the air out of them. One man in Chicago suffered 3 broken ribs simply from being pressed against the mat. Bruce asked a second question. How does he grab? Dan paused. What do you mean? I mean his entry, Bruce said. How does he close the distance? Does he rush forward or wait? Does he circle, left hand or right hand first? Does he reach high or low? Dan thought carefully. He rushes straight forward, both arms spread wide like a bear. He tries to wrap you up in a clinch. Once his arms are around you, your feet leave the ground and the fight is finished. Bruce said nothing for 4 full seconds. Dan counted them. Then Bruce spoke. A bear hug requires both arms encircling the body. That means his center line is exposed for approximately 1.5 seconds during the entry, 1.5 seconds where his chest, his throat, and his solar plexus have absolutely no protection. Dan felt a chill move through him. He had trained alongside Bruce for years. He knew precisely what Bruce could accomplish in 1.5 seconds. Most people can manage a blink in that window of time. Bruce Lee could deliver 6 strikes. You're going to challenge him, aren't you? Dan said. It wasn't really a question. Bruce answered it anyway. Get me 2 tickets. Good seats. Now think about this for a moment, because this is where most people stop and give up. Most of us face a situation that seems too big, too powerful, too overwhelming, and we immediately convince ourselves that we don't have what it takes. We tell ourselves the gap is too wide, the opponent is too strong, the odds are stacked too heavily against us. And so we sit in the audience and watch other people try and fail, and we use their failure as permission to never step forward ourselves. That feeling of being too small for the challenge in front of you, that's exactly where this story lives. Now they were there, row 14, the Grand Olympic Auditorium. 3 challengers had already stepped up before the announcer scanned the room for a 4th. A Marine, 230 pounds, crew-cut, military bearing. He lasted 3.1 seconds. His feet left the ground at 2.4. His face went white. He couldn't breathe. His ribs were compressing inward. He tapped 3 times quickly. Tap, tap, tap. The universal signal for I surrender. Please stop. He sat on the stage gasping, holding his ribs, eyes wet from involuntary tears caused by the pressure on his chest. A wrestler from UCLA, 260 pounds, 5.2 seconds. A Kenpo black belt from San Diego, 195 pounds, 4.1 seconds. 3 challengers down, 3 failures. The briefcase still locked. The $80,000 still completely untouched. The announcer scanned the audience one final time. Anyone else? Last chance. $80,000. 10 seconds. Anyone? Silence. The crowd had already run the numbers. Size wins. Mass wins. Gravity wins. The laws of physics had a perfect record, same as Viktor Kranov. I'll try. The voice was quiet and conversational. It came from the middle of the auditorium, row 14. It carried no aggression, no swagger, no chest-pounding declaration of courage. Just 2 words delivered the way someone might casually order a cup of coffee. I'll try. The announcer squinted past the stage lights into the darkness. Who said that? I did. A man stood up. Row 14, seat 6. Black mandarin collar jacket, black pants, no uniform visible, no belt. He was small. That was the first thing every single person in that building registered simultaneously. Not just regular small, small in direct comparison to what he was volunteering to face. The 3 men who had just failed weighed 230, 260, and 195 pounds. This man looked considerably lighter than all of them. Murmurs spread through the crowd like a current. Some people laughed, not cruel laughter, protective laughter. The kind that says, please, don't do this to yourself. A woman 3 seats away whispered to her husband that someone really ought to stop him before he got seriously hurt. Dan Inosanto grabbed Bruce's sleeve. His words came in urgent Cantonese mixed with English, the way they always spoke when they didn't want anyone nearby to understand. Bruce, I brought you here to watch, not to actually fight. You weigh 138 pounds. He weighs 500. That's a 360-pound difference. This isn't philosophy, Bruce. This is bone density. This is compression force. This is a hospital visit waiting to happen. Bruce calmly buttoned his jacket. That single gesture, the same one he always performed before something was about to begin. He looked at Dan directly. 1.5 seconds, Dan. That's all I need. Bruce Lee walked toward the stage. 800 people watched him move. Every single one of them was thinking the exact same thing. This man is about to get badly hurt. He's too small, too light, too lean. The three men who had just failed combined had over 700 pounds of weight advantage over Victor, and they still couldn't last 5 seconds. This man looked like he could stand entirely within Victor's shadow. The walk from row 14 to the stage was 40 feet. Bruce covered it in exactly the time it takes an audience to start feeling genuine guilt about what they're about to witness. He reached the stage, climbed 2 steps. His feet made almost no sound on the wood. Where Victor had made the entire stage tremble, Bruce made it whisper. He walked to center stage, and for the first time the audience saw both men together under a single spotlight. The image was so visually contradictory that a man in the 7th row actually stood and shouted that the kid didn't have to prove anything and should walk away now. Bruce didn't turn around. He was already past the point where warnings from strangers could reach him. The announcer approached with a clipboard, standard procedure. Name, Bruce Lee, weight, 138 pounds. The announcer's pen stopped moving. He looked up. He looked at Victor. He looked back. 138, that's correct. The lightest challenger that evening had been 195 pounds. The lightest challenger in the entire history of the challenge was 172 pounds. Bruce was 138. I can count, Bruce said quietly. The announcer stared for a moment, then wrote it down. Martial arts background, Jeet Kune Wing Chun, Chinese boxing. The announcer had never encountered Jeet Kune before. He wrote Chinese martial arts and moved forward. Any injuries or medical conditions? None, Bruce said, but you should have the medical team ready. The announcer replied that they always prepared for the challenger. Bruce held his gaze. I wasn't talking about me. The announcer walked away genuinely confused. Victor stood in his corner watching this small man approach. He had absorbed the information, 138 pounds. He processed it the same way he processed every challenger's information. Irrelevant. Whether the man weighed 138 or 238, the outcome would be identical. Grab, lift, compress, drop. Next challenger. But something made Victor look twice. He couldn't name what it was. Something in the way this man moved. Something in the way he stood. His feet weren't planted the way frightened men always planted their feet, wide and rigid and bracing desperately for impact. This man's weight was slightly forward, just enough to suggest he wasn't preparing to absorb an attack. He was preparing to deliver one. Victor dismissed the thought. Attack what exactly? His kneecap? Victor had 360 pounds on this man. There was nothing worth attacking when you were standing in front of a mountain. Mountains don't have weaknesses. Mountains simply exist, and everything smaller eventually gets crushed beneath them. The bell rang. Victor did exactly what Victor always did. He exploded forward, both arms spread wide, head lowered, 500 pounds of human momentum covering the distance between them in under 2 seconds. This was the moment that had ended 200 men. This was the rush, the avalanche, the tidal wave of mass and force that no fighting style from any tradition had managed to answer. Every previous challenger had responded with one of 3 options. Some froze, completely paralyzed by the sight of 500 pounds bearing down on them. They were grabbed while standing completely still. Some retreated, backpedaling frantically toward the ropes, hopping to escape. Victor was faster than his size suggested. He caught them at the edges. Some attacked, throwing a punch, a kick. Some desperate last technique that bounced off Victor's body the way rain bounces off concrete. Then they were grabbed anyway. Every possible response had been tried. Freeze, retreat, attack. None of them worked. All 3 options had been tested hundreds of times across 15 cities. None of them had produced a single successful outcome. Bruce Lee chose option 4, the one that didn't exist yet, the option nobody had attempted because nobody had thought far enough ahead to imagine it. He moved forward, not backward, not sideways, forward, directly into the charge, toward 500 pounds of oncoming destruction. The audience gasped audibly. Several people physically looked away. They couldn't bring themselves to watch the collision. A 138-pound man moving toward a 500-pound freight train wasn't bravery. It was mathematics, and the mathematics were brutal, but Bruce Lee never collided with Victor Kranoff, because Bruce Lee was no longer where Victor expected him to be. In the 1.8 seconds it took Victor to cross the ring, Bruce had moved forward and angled left, not dramatically far, just 18 inches, barely more than 1 stride, just enough to position himself outside the sweep of Victor's outstretched arms. just enough to let 500 pounds of forward momentum rush completely past him the way a train rushes past a person standing 1 foot from the tracks. You feel the wind, you feel the ground vibrate beneath your feet, but you are completely untouched. Victor's arms closed around empty air. His own momentum carried him 2 full steps past where Bruce had been standing a moment earlier. For the first time in 203 challenges, Viktor Kranov had grabbed nothing at all. Victor turned around, confused. This had genuinely never happened before across all 15 cities and all 203 attempts. He reset his stance, faced Bruce again, and charged a second time. Faster now, angrier. His arms sweeping wider to cover more ground, leaving theoretically no room for escape. Bruce moved again, same direction left, but this time he didn't only evade. As Victor's massive right arm swept past him, Bruce's left hand made brief contact with it. 2 fingers resting lightly on the inside of Victor's wrist. Not pushing, not gripping, gidding. The arm that was intended to trap him continued its natural arc, but now traveled 2 inches further than Victor's body had planned. 2 inches. In combat, 2 inches is the entire difference between capture and freedom. Victor's arms closed behind Bruce, finding each other instead of their target. Victor was essentially embracing himself. 500 pounds of bewildered momentum stumbling forward, while a 138-pound man stood calmly behind him like a matador who has just watched a bull carry itself past. The audience couldn't process what their eyes were delivering to their brains. The images didn't make logical sense. This small man wasn't merely surviving. He was making the giant miss repeatedly, casually, as though it had been rehearsed. But it hadn't been rehearsed. Victor's frustration was completely genuine. His confusion was real. His breathing was growing heavier. He had never worked this hard in the ring before. Challengers had always come to him. They got grabbed. They failed. That was the script every single time. This man was rewriting it from underneath him. Victor charged a third time, every ounce of 500 pounds fully committed. No technique, no strategy, no calculation, pure animal aggression, the mountain descending on a village. And this time Bruce didn't simply evade. He stepped inside, close, uncomfortably, impossibly close, inside the effective radius of Victor's arms where the grab had no mechanical power remaining. His right foot planted firmly between Victor's massive boots. His right hand rose, open palm angled upward, directed at Victor's chin. It stopped 1 inch away, not a punch, a message. 1 inch between Bruce Lee's palm and Viktor Kranov's jaw. 1 inch separating consciousness from unconsciousness. 1 inch between standing upright and collapsing to the stage floor. 1 inch between the mountain and the ground it was always going to return to eventually. Bruce held that position. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. Victor froze completely. His eyes attempted to focus on the hand positioned beneath his chin. And in that moment, he understood something that 500 pounds had never needed to understand before. He was not the most dangerous person standing on this stage tonight. The arena held its breath for 3 full seconds. Then it detonated. 800 people erupted simultaneously, screaming, rising from their seats, stamping the old wooden floor until it vibrated harder than Victor's heaviest footsteps ever had. They had just witnessed the impossible made ordinary by someone who had spent years refusing to accept that size was the final answer to any question. Bruce stepped back, offered a slight bow, walked off the stage, descended the 2 steps, moved back through the auditorium. Row 14, seat 6. He sat down. Dan Inosanto's hands were shaking visibly. How many seconds was that? Dan asked. Bruce picked up his program, opened it to the page he had previously folded, smoothed the crease carefully with his thumb. I wasn't counting, he said. I told you I wasn't interested in surviving 10 seconds. The briefcase remained at the edge of the stage. $80,000, completely untouched. Bruce Lee never walked over to collect it, never asked for it. He hadn't come for money. He had come to demonstrate something that no amount of money could purchase or replace. That physics contains exceptions when the mind is precise enough to find them. That mountains have pressure points when you understand geometry better than your opponent understands force. That 138 pounds of moving water will always locate a path through 500 pounds of stationary rock. The next time you feel like you're too small for the obstacle standing in front of you, remember that the obstacle is probably just waiting for someone who stopped thinking about size and started thinking about angles. 800 witnesses, 203 who failed. One who didn't need to count the seconds because he was never playing the game the way it had been designed to be played. November 11th, 1967, the Grand Olympic Auditorium, the night the mountain finally met the water, and the water simply flowed around it.